The rain hammered down like God's own judgment, turning the cracked asphalt of Interstate 70 into a black mirror of shattered dreams. Grayson Harper, 18 and trembling, stood there in the downpour, his backpack slung over one shoulder, watching the taillights of his father's pickup fade into the storm-smeared night. "You're dead to us," his dad had snarled through the open window, voice thick with whiskey and hate, before the truck lurched forward, leaving Grayson soaked, alone, and utterly unmoored in the heart of Kansas. In that instant, the boy he'd been the one who mowed lawns for extra cash and dreamed of college died right there on the shoulder, replaced by a ghost clawing for survival under the indifferent stars. He didn't cry at first. Shock numbed him, a cold fist around his ribs as thunder cracked overhead, illuminating the endless ribbon of highways stretching east and west like veins of forgotten America. Grayson had known this reckoning was coming, ever since that humid July night when his little brother caught him kissing Tommy Ellis behind the bleachers at the county fair. Tommy, with his easy grin and calloused hands from baling hay, had been his secret summer fire-stolen touches in the bed of a rusted Ford. Whispers of futures neither believed in. But secrets in a town like Harlan, Kansas, were thinner than the pages of the family Bible. And by morning, the whispers had reached his parents' ears like poison. His mother had wept, not for him, but for the scandal, clutching her cross necklace as if it could exorcise the shame. "How could you bring this on us, Grayson? After all we've sacrificed." His father, red-faced and bellowing, had grabbed him by the collar, dragging him toward the door. "No son of mine is going to live like that. You're choosing this filth over family." The argument escalated in the dim kitchen light, plates rattling in the cabinets, until his dad shoved him out into the yard, keys already in hand. The truck's engine roared to life, and Grayson, barefoot and shirtless in the frenzy, scrambled for his backpack, yelling promises to change, to pray harder, anything. But the door slammed, tires spun gravel, and he was left chasing shadows down the driveway, the rain starting as if the sky itself mourned his exile. Hitchhiking that first night was a blur of desperation. A trucker in a flannel shirt picked him up outside Salina, eyeing him warily in the rear view. "Run away," the man grunted, offering a lukewarm coffee from his thermos. Grayson nodded, throat too tight for lies, and mumbled something about a fight with his folks. The trucker didn't press, just dropped him at a dingy motel on the outskirts of Topeka, slipping a crumpled tin for the vending machine. "World's full of bastards. Kid, keep your head down." Alone in the room that smelled of stale smoke and regret, Grayson finally broke sobs racking his body until dawn crept through the threadbare curtains, painting the walls in pale accusation. By morning, he'd scraped together a plan from the fragments of his old life, a wad of crumpled 20s from his lawn mowing savings, a faded map from the motel's lobby, and a fierce, burning resolve to never look back. He caught a Greyhound east, the bus rumbling through cornfields that blurred into suburbs, then the jagged skyline of street. Lewis. There, in the shadow of the gateway arch, he stepped off into a world that felt both alien and electric, a city pulsing with strangers who didn't know his shame. He found work washing dishes at a diner in Soulard, the kind of place where jazz drifted from hidden speakers and locals swapped stories over greasy hash browns. The owner, a wiry woman named Rita with tattoos snaking up her arms, took one look at his hollow eyes and said, "You eat on the house, kid. And if anyone's asking, your family here." Nights were harder. Grayson crashed on a cot in the diner's back room. The clatter of pots his lullaby. But sleep brought nightmares of his mother's tear-streaked face. His father's fist raised like a gavel. He missed Tommy most in those quiet hours, wondering if his lover was out there under the same moon, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Letters. No. Too risky, his family would burn them unread. Instead, Grayson poured his ache into a battered notebook, scribbling poems that bled ink like open wounds, lines about boys who loved in the dark, highways that swallowed secrets, and the hollow echo of a name no one called anymore. Weeks turned to months, the city weaving him into its fabric. He traded shifts for a room in a walk-up above a laundromat, walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments and laughter. At the diner, he met Javier, a line cook with warm brown eyes and a laugh that cut through the steam like sunlight. Javier was from El Salvador, slipped over the border years ago, chasing dreams of stability in this land of plenty and peril. Their first real talk came over closing cleanup, Grayson wiping counters while Javier chopped onions that made his eyes water more than the blade. "You got that look." "Mijo," Javier said, bumping his shoulder. "Like you've been chewed up and spit out." Grayson hesitated, the words sticking like burrs. But something in Javier's steady gaze cracked him open. "My folks. They found out I'm gay. Kicked me out. Left me on the damn road like trash." The confession hung heavy, but Javier just nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "Mi familia did the same, but for crossing deserts instead of lines in my heart. We're survivors. You and me." That night, over stolen beers on the fire escape, they shared stories: Grayson's stolen kisses in Kansas fields, Javier's hidden loves in San Salvador markets. It wasn't romance. Not yet. But a bridge across the chasm of isolation. Two outcasts forging warmth from the cold. As autumn leaves turned the streets to fire, Grayson enrolled in night classes at a community college. His hands still raw from dishwater, but his mind igniting with possibility. Sociology lectures on identity and marginalization hit like thunderclaps, validating the rage he'd buried. He volunteered at a local LGBTQ center, stuffing envelopes for pride events, his voice gaining strength in support groups where stories mirrored his own rejections, reinventions, quiet triumphs. There, he met Lena, a fierce trans woman with a mohawk and a wit sharper than any knife, who became his chosen sister. "Honey, you're not broken," she'd say, linking arms as they marched in the parade, rainbow flags snapping in the wind. "You're a goddamn mosaic." But the past was a shadow that lengthened with the days. One crisp October evening, as Grayson and Javier walked the riverfront, hands brushing tentatively, a payphone rang in his pocket, a burner he'd kept for emergencies. The voice on the other end was his Aunt Clara, his mother's sister, the only relative who'd ever slipped him extra cash at family barbecues. "Grayson." "Oh, God. It's you. Your mama. She's sick. Cancer. And she wants to see you. Begs for it. Every night." The words landed like a sucker punch, the arch looming behind them like a monument to unresolved sins. Javier squeezed his hand, grounding him as the world tilted. They left me for dead. Clara. Why now? She sobbed, the line crackling with distance. Regrets eating her alive. Boy. Your pa too. Though he'd never say it. Please. One last time. Grayson hung up, the phone heavy as lead, and turned to Javier, whose eyes held no judgment. Only the quiet strength of someone who'd learned forgiveness was a choice, not a chain. The decision gnawed at him through winter's bite. Street. Lewis blanketed in snow. Grayson threw himself into work and classes. But the call echoed in his dreams, his mother's frail hand reaching, his father's silence a wall of stone. Javier became his anchor, their friendship deepening into something tender. Stolen kisses in the laundromat's drier hum. Bodies entwining in the narrow bed where vulnerability bloomed like spring. You don't owe them your heart, Javier murmured one night, tracing the scar on Grayson's knuckles from that final shove. But if it heals you, I'm here. By spring, the pull was undeniable. Grayson booked a bus ticket west. The same Greyhound line that had carried him to salvation, now looping him back to the abyss. Javier saw him off at the station, their goodbye a fierce embrace under fluorescent lights. Come back to me, Corazon. This city's dimmer without you. The miles unspooled like thread. Fields giving way to the flat expanse of home. Each milepost a milestone of dread and fragile hope. Harlan hadn't changed, same grain elevators piercing the sky. Same dusty main street with its faded awnings. But Grayson had. He walked the 2 miles from the bus stop to his childhood home. Backpack heavier with years. Heart armored in resolve. The porch light flickered as he knocked, the door creaking open to reveal his aunt. Eyes red-rimmed. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of illness and liniment. His mother a wraith in the recliner, cheeks hollowed by chemo's cruel hand. Grayson. Her voice was a whisper, hand trembling as she reached. He stood frozen, the boy in the rain warring with the man he'd forged. His father lurked in the kitchen doorway, shoulders slumped. The fire of that night banked to embers. No apologies spilled, easy words stumbled, laced with if-onlys and prayers too late. But in her eyes, he saw the woman who'd once bandaged his scraped knees. And in his father's averted gaze, the echo of a love twisted by fear. They talked through the afternoon, voices low, unraveling the knots of years. She confessed the shame that had silenced her, the church elders' whispers that chained her tongue. He shared his scars, the lonely highways, the loves found and feared, the family he'd built from strangers' kindness. His father grunted admissions, voice rough, I was wrong. Son. Thought I was protecting you. From what? I don't know anymore. Tears carved paths down weathered faces. Not erasing the pain, but diluting it, like rain on parched earth. As dusk fell, Grayson knelt by her chair, her fingers frail in his. I forgive you, Mom. Not for you, for me. The words freed something ancient, a weight lifting as stars pricked the sky outside. He stayed a week, mending what he could, then boarded the bus east. Lighter, whole in his fractures. Back in street. Lewis. Javier waited with open arms, their love no longer tentative but a bonfire against the night. Grayson finished his degree, opened a cafe with Lena and Javier, a haven of coffee and confessions, walls lined with stories of resilience. Years later, when his mother passed, he returned for the funeral, standing tall beside his father, who whispered, "Proud of you, boy." The words a balm long overdue. In the end, Grayson learned that roads, once abandoned, could circle back not to trap, but to heal. Love, in all its forms, was the truest homecoming, a light that outshone even the darkest storms. The cancer had spread faster than anyone anticipated, a shadow creeping through his mother's body like the very regrets that haunted her nights. Grayson lingered in Harlan that week. The old Harper housed a capsule of faded wallpaper and unspoken grief. Every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the life he'd fled. His Aunt Clara bustled in the kitchen, brewing weak tea and avoiding his eyes, as if guilt were contagious. But Grayson moved through it all with a quiet grace he'd earned on those endless bus rides. Helping with meals, reading aloud from her dog-eared romance novel stories of lovers reunited against odds, ironic echoes of his own fractured tale. His father, Harlan Harper Sr., was a monolith cracking at the edges. A lifetime of welding at the local mill had bent his back and hardened his hands. But now, in the dim lamplight, he seemed smaller, fiddling with a pipe he no longer smoked. Their conversations started halting, over supper of canned soup and cornbread, safe topics like the harvest yields or the high school's new coach. But one evening, as fireflies danced outside the screen door, the dam broke. "I read your letters to your ma," his father admitted, voice gravelly. "The ones you sent before." "Well, before. Poetic stuff. Made me think." Grayson paused, spoon midway to his mouth, the admission a spark in dry tinder. "You kept them?" His father nodded, pulling a shoebox from under the side table. Yellowed envelopes tied with twine. Inside, Grayson's youthful scrawl splees for understanding. Vignettes of city life. Hints of the man emerging from the boy. "Burned some," his father confessed, eyes downcast. "But these, they stuck." It was an absolution, but it was a thread, fragile and real, weaving toward something like repair. Nights were for his mother, Evelyn, her hospital bed squeezed into the living room for those final days at home. She'd lost her hair to the treatments, a colorful scarf wrapped turban style. Her once vibrant blue eyes dulled but sharp with urgency. "Tell me everything, Gray," she'd urge, her hand cool in his. And he did, pouring out the terror of that rainy night. The kindness of strangers like Rita at the diner. The electric thrill of his first Pride March. Banners waving like promises. She listened, tears slipping free, interjecting with memories of his childhood, the way he'd collect fireflies in jars, releasing them at dawn, whispering secrets to the glow. "I failed you," she murmured one midnight, the oxygen machine humming softly. "Let fear steal my boy." "You were scared too, Mom." "Of losing everything." Grayson's voice cracked. The forgiveness he'd uttered days before deepening roots. They spoke of faith, not the fire and brimstone sermons that had condemned him, but a quieter grace, the kind that bloomed in sunflowers nodding to the sun. By week's end, as her breaths grew shallow, she pressed a locket into his palm, a silver heart with their family photo inside. Him as a gap-toothed kid grinning between them. Wear it for me. Remember the love, not the leaving. The funeral was a small affair in the Harlan Methodist Church. Pews half filled with neighbors who'd gossiped in his youth, but now offered condolences with averted eyes. Grayson stood at the graveside. Javier flown in at his side. A solid presence in pressed shirt and quiet strength. His father clasped his shoulder as dirt pattered on the casket. The gesture rough, but real. She's at peace now. And us. We start over. No grand speeches. Just the raw honesty of men learning to bridge chasms with tentative steps. Backen Street. Lewis. The city welcomed him with its familiar chaos horns blaring on Market Street. The Mississippi's muddy churn a constant companion. Javier had kept the home fires burning. The apartment above the laundromat now theirs in full. Walls adorned with photos, Grayson at graduation. Arms around Lena mid-laugh. A candid of Javier chopping vegetables with flour-dusted cheeks. Their love had deepened in absence. No longer shadowed by Grayson's ghosts, but fueled by thema partnership of equals. Where vulnerability was strength. Not shame. The cafe came next. A dream hatched over late-night sketches on napkins. Harper's Haven. Grayson named it. A nod to roots reclaimed. With Lena's business savvy and Javier's culinary flair. They leased a corner spot in the Grove. The neighborhood's heartbeat of queer joy and eclectic souls. Opening day dawned crisp. Rainbow ribbons fluttering from the awning. The air thick with fresh espresso and hope. Patrons trickled in regulars from the center. Curious locals. A cluster of college kids with nose rings and open hearts. Grayson manned the counter. Steaming lattes with a smile that reached his eyes. While Javier plated empanadas infused with Midwestern twists. Lena handling the books with her trademark sass. Success wasn't overnight, but it built like trust steady. Surprising. Reviews trickled in on Yelp, praising the soul-warming vibes and stories in every sip. Grayson hosted open mics on Thursdays. Poets and singers spilling verses of love's many hues. The room alive with snaps and cheers. One night, a young man named Riley took the stage. Voice quivering as he read about coming out in a small town. Eyes locking on Grayson's in the crowd. Afterward, over pie, Riley confessed. Your story. I read about the cafe's owner in the newsletter. Gave me courage. Grayson bought him a slice. Heart-swelling proof that scars could light paths for others. Yet life wove in its tempests. Javier's green card renewal hit snags. Immigration bureaucracy a labyrinth of forms and fears. Echoing Grayson's own displacements. They navigated it together. Grayson testifying at hearings. His words a testament to the life they'd built. He's my home, Grayson said. Voice steady under fluorescent glare. Approval came after months. A stamped paper that felt like victory's exhale. In celebration, they drove to the Ozarks, pitching a tent by a rushing creek, making love under a canopy of stars' bodies and souls intertwined. The river's song washing away old doubts. Years folded forward. The cafe expanding to a second location. Grayson penning a memoir in stolen hours, roads untraveled. Tales of exile and embrace that climbed bestseller lists. Proceeds funding scholarships for queer youth. His father visited once. Awkward in the urban bustle, but thawing over coffee. admitting he'd joined a PFLAG chapter back home. "Your ma would be proud," he said, and Grayson believed it, the locket warm against his chest. Through it all, love anchored him, Javier's hand in his at pride parades, Lena's fierce hugs after tough days. The chosen family that proved blood wasn't the only bond. Grayson learned that being left on the road hadn't ended him. It had begun him, forging a life where authenticity was the greatest rebellion, forgiveness the deepest romance. And in quiet moments, watching the highway from his window, he whispered thanks to the rain that had baptized him anew. Grayson's memoir hit shelves in the spring of 2032. A slim volume with a cover evoking that fateful highway-silhouetted figure against stormy skies. Title embossed in defiant gold. Launch night at Harper's Haven drew a crowd that spilled onto the sidewalk. Fairy lights strung like constellations overhead. Javier manned the espresso machine, winking as he foamed hearts into lattes, while Lena emceed with her electric energy, introducing Grayson to thunderous applause. He read from the prologue. Voice steady, "The road didn't break me. It showed me the way." Questions flowed after all, confessions from fans who'd walked similar paths. Gratitude from those inspired to speak their truths. By midnight, as the last stragglers nursed nightcaps, Grayson pulled Javier into the back alley for a kiss. The cities hum a symphony to their joy. Fame brought its whispers of pressure, but Grayson grounded it in purpose. He toured the Midwest, speaking at high schools and libraries. His story a beacon for kids in towns like Harlem, places where rainbows were rare, but resilience ran deep. In Des Moines, a teen approached after a talk. Eyes wide, "My dad's like yours was. What if he never changes?" Grayson knelt to his level, echoing words once given to him. Change starts with you living loud. And sometimes, they surprise you. The boy hugged him fierce. A spark of hope exchanged in that fluorescent-lit hallway. Back home, life deepened its roots. Javier proposed on their anniversary, down on one knee in the Ozarks Creek bed, ring glinting like a captured star. "We've traveled roads apart and together," he said, accent wrapping the words in warmth. "Marry me, mi amor." Grayson's yes was a laugh through tears. Their wedding a vibrant affair in the Grove, Lena officiating in sequence. Guests a tapestry of friends from diner days to center allies. Vows exchanged under an arch of wildflowers. "I choose you." Every storm and sunrise. Fatherhood came unexpectedly. A call from Lena's circly, a surrogacy match with a couple facing barriers. But when plans shifted, they turned to Grayson and Javier. "We'd be dads." Grayson breathed, hand on Javier's as they pored over profiles. The journey was a whirlwind of appointments and anxieties. But 9 months later, little Sophia arrived, dark curls and fierce cries filling their apartment. Nights blurred into feeds and lullabies, Grayson rocking her to stories of highways turned homeward, Javier humming Salvadoran folk tunes. Parenthood reshaped them, amplifying joys and testing limits. But in her gummy smiles, they found infinity. His father's decline came gradual, a stroke in 35 that left Harlan Sr. in a wheelchair, words slurring but spirit unbroken. Grayson flew home monthly, the visits evolving from duty to delight, pushing him through farmers' markets, debating crop prices over pie. "You turned out better than I deserved," his father rasped one afternoon, hand gnarled on the chair arm. Grayson squeezed it, Locket catching the sun. We both did. Dad. Water under the bridge. When the end neared, Grayson brought Sophia, her tiny fingers wrapping his father's pinky. A generation's grace bridging the gap. Harlan passed peacefully, murmuring thanks. The room scented with Evelyn's favorite lilacs. Grief wove into the fabric, but so did legacy. Grayson expanded the cafes into community hubs, free meals for runaways, workshops on identity, a library stocked with queer histories. He mentored Riley, now a budding author. Their bond a quiet mentorship of encouragement. Javier thrived in the kitchens, publishing a cookbook blending cultures, flavors of exile, recipes for hearts as much as palates. Decades later, Grayson Gray at the Temples sat on the cafe porch with Javier. Sophia, now a teen with her father's laugh, sprawled nearby, sketching designs for her own dreams. The highway hummed distant, a reminder not of loss, but of arrival. We made it, Grayson murmured, Javier's head on his shoulder. More than that, his husband replied, fingers laced. We made a world. In the quiet, Grayson knew the road's true gift, not the leaving, but the loving that followed, fierce, flawed, forever. And in that, every abandonment became a beginning. Sophia's sketches evolved into blueprints. Her passion for architecture a spark that lit family dinners with debates on sustainable design, eco-homes for queer communes. Bridges literal and figurative. Grayson watched her with a father's quiet awe, seeing echoes of his own reinvention in her bold lines. Build something that lasts, kiddo, he'd say, ruffling her hair. Like we did. Javier beamed, plating experimental fusion dishes. Their home a haven of laughter and lingering spices. The cafes grew into a nonprofit chain. Haven Routes. Franchises dotting highways from Kansas to the coast's rest stops for the weary. With counselors on call and bunks for those freshly cast out. Grayson's memoir-inspired spin-offs. A podcast series interviewing survivors. Voices weaving a chorus of survival. Lena, ever the dynamo, ran the operations. Her mohawk now streaked silver, but spirit undimmed. We're not just feeding bodies, she'd declare in board meetings. We're nourishing souls. Personal storms tested them still. Sophia came out as bi in her junior year. A casual revelation over tacos that swelled Grayson's heart with Vindicaciono roads for her. Only open arms. But Javier's health faltered. A diagnosis of early arthritis from years on his feet, forcing semi-retirement. Grayson adapted, taking over kitchen duties. Their roles fluid as ever. Nights, they'd dance slow in the living room to old jazz. Sophia giggling from the stairs. The music a thread to their beginnings. Grayson's second book, Circles of Return, delved deeper essays on forgiveness's fractal nature. How his parents' ghosts had shaped his grace. It won awards. Panels buzzing with his insights. Hate isn't the opposite of love. Silence is. We fill it with stories. Tours took him cross-country. But home pulled strongest Thanksgivings with extended kin. From Aunt Clara's apple pie to Riley's latest readings. A wildfire season in 42 brought crisis. A Haven route in California evacuated families. Grayson coordinating from afar. Voice horizon calls. Javier joined remotely. Packing care kits shipped overnight. Through the blaze, Stories emerged a trans dad shielding his kids. Echoes of protection Grayson wished he'd known. Relief efforts bonded them closer to activists nationwide. Alliances forged in ash. Aging crept gentle. Grayson at 60 penning letters to his younger self. The rain was a baptism. Trust the ark. Sophia's wedding in the Grove sealed Joyce's garden ceremony. Her partner a soft-spoken engineer with Javier's warmth. Grayson walked her down the aisle. Locket gleaming. Whispering. Choose love. Always. In twilight years, Grayson and Javier retired to a cottage near the Mississippi. Porch swing creaking to river rhythms. Sophia visited with grandkids. Tiny whirlwinds chasing fireflies. Jars glowing like memories. One eve, as sunset bled gold, Javier took Grayson's hand. Best road I ever hitched. Grayson smiled. The boy in the rain long gone, replaced by a man rich in what mattered. Legacy lived on, havens thriving. Stories enduring. Grayson passed quietly at 80, surrounded by love's chorus. Javier's kiss his last light. The world he'd built whispered on. Proof that from abandonment's edge, one could cartwheel into eternity. The cottage by the river became a pilgrimage site after Grayson's passing. Not in morbidity, but celebration, friends toasting on the porch, sharing how his light had redirected their paths. Javier tended the garden, roses blooming defiant. Sophia curating a small archive of his writings in the attic. Grandkids romped the banks, learning tales of the highwayman who turned exile to empire. Javier held on 5 years more. His cookbook reissued with forewords from luminaries, recipes evoking their shared feasts. His farewell was a jazz wake at the original cafe. Lena stooped but sparkling, leading toasts to the heart that cooked us all. Sophia scattered his ashes in the Ozarks Creek, waters carrying him home. The Harper's story rippled outward, a testament etched in lives changed. Riley's novels topped charts, dedicated to the road that led me here. Haven routes spanned continents, outposts in small towns where rain fell on open doors. In Harlan, a plaque by the interstate marked the spot. Here, grace began. And in quiet corners, wherever a young soul stood soaked and staring at taillights, a whisper lingered: forgive, love, endure. The road always circles back to healing, to home.